Well, let's get to our speaker. So Ryan Omel is our speaker. I met him, I'm gonna call it 12 years ago. He hired me, I think off Craigslist, to come help him frame his old barn house. And then we stayed in contact ever since then. So I was Josh, the handyman at that time. That's how I got started in real estate, as a handyman. Yeah, so we just stayed in touch. I only worked that one day though, so I think I sucked because he never called me back. And he don't work, so I don't know, we'll see how that goes. But hey, give it up for Ryan Omel, guys.
Thanks, man. All right, so can you hear me in the back of the room? So I'm trying to get a gauge of how loud I need to speak. Okay, so if you're on this side of the room right in here, you might not be able to see the entire slides, but this is a heavy slide presentation. So if you need to move, I won't feel bad if you scoot over to the other side. So as you can tell, I'm not tech savvy. I can't figure out how to actually do the presentation without showing all of my screen at the top there, which is part of the title, right? The title of my topic is Moron to Millions, the rocket launch right up to the moon and back. So, okay, before I go too far, I just want to make sure I give glory to God. About 20 years ago, I was a self-professed atheist, and my wife had to basically drag me to church, almost kicking and screaming, but I was not very happy with God. And so thankfully, over the years, God got a hold of me. And so if any of you, I don't necessarily want to preach at you or anything, but if any of you have questions, obviously the Bible is a great source. A great book that I found in my life was The Case for Christ, and they also made that into a movie. But I'll stick around afterwards, so if anybody has questions about that or wants to know more about my story, be happy to share. Also, my email address will be on here, so you can shoot me an email if you want to talk at another time. So the question I have for you, and you don't have to answer it right now, but I'm going to come back to this at the very end, but I want you to think about this. Is it okay to be a moron? Yeah. So, and I do have to apologize. I'm sorry, I have nothing to sell you today. Josh just needed a speaker to fill in, so I decided to fill in. But if you do stick around at the very end, I'm going to give away a few of my favorite books. And so they'll be given away to people that have questions. So to make things go pretty quickly, I'll have you save your questions for the end if you don't mind. But if you stick around, you might win a book at the end. So the main character in my presentation is the moron. And obviously that's me. And just a little bit about myself. I grew up in Fairbury, Nebraska. Does anybody know? Maybe most of you don't want to claim to know Fairbury, but yeah, the Fairbury Jeffs. So it's about an hour southwest of Lincoln. But after high school, I went to UNL, graduated with a bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism. And as I go through here, you're going to know why I never actually went into broadcast journalism. Definitely don't have the gift of gab or presentation skills for TV or radio for that matter. But I've lived in Lincoln ever since. And some of the things over the course of my career, I owned a handyman franchise at one point in time. And we had 16 employees at our largest point. I worked for a title insurance company for a number of years. And basically, I became a real estate agent at the perfect time, right when the housing market crashed, about 2008. And so that was a short stint. And then I'm a certified general real estate appraiser. And I don't do appraisals anymore, though. So, oh, wait. Forgot the most important part here, my wife. She's not here right now, but Jennifer Omel, I'm truly blessed that she is my wife. And first, because she married me, and then second, because she stayed with me through all that I've put her through with all the real estate that we've done. And when you see some of these videos or photos and stories, you'll be like, yes, now I know why he's blessed. So we've been married for 25 years as of this year, and we got to write off our business trip to Belize this year for our anniversary because we have a VA that lives in Belize, so we got to do some business down there. And so if you haven't been to Belize, I know a few of you have been there. Yes, exactly. Great place to visit, good food, all that fun stuff. My children, so my wife and I have 5 not children anymore. They're young adults, but Ellie, West, Natasha, Dane, and Rowen. And Rowen is our youngest. He's a freshman in high school. And then Dane is a senior in high school, and then the other ones are out of the house right now. So this is what my life was like right when we got married, obviously. But my wife had really, that's why she's got a smile on her face. She had no clue what she was in for. And I mean that. Because I made her do stupid stuff like this. So this is an event that some guys in my men's Bible study used to do. Every November, we'd do the No Shave November thing, and then we'd dress up really stupidly and go out on the town. So this year, or that year I should say, was a 1970s theme. One year it was lumberjacks and twins on the left, bikers. I think we were Vikings and cowboys other years. The family here, when the kids were younger. And then in the picture on the right, we actually added a child, the youngest, Rowan. We adopted him when he was 5 years old. But that's my wife's graduation. She's a nurse, but she got her bachelor's degree late. So if you want to be a part of the Omel family, you have to play Monopoly, or at least learn how to play Monopoly, and an occasional game of cash flow. So does anybody know what the game cash flow is? Raise of hands. Okay. So you have to at least partake in that from time to time at the Omel household. And then the picture, most recent picture of our family, that's a couple years ago, but it's hard to get everybody all in one spot when they're living out of town. So the Moron, how my wife and I got started in real estate. And I do need to clarify that I am the moron, my wife is not. She just got to go for the ride on that, but she's the beauty and I would be the beast. So we bought our first house, and this wasn't an investment house, this was just a house that we decided to live in, our very first one. And how many people, raise of hands here, how many people know Sheridan Boulevard in Lincoln and the nice big historic homes that there are? Yes, a lot of you. Well, a couple lessons first, and then we'll talk about our house on Sheridan. So lesson number one, everyone knows this location, but I would just suggest that you invest in great neighborhoods. And this is opposed to investing in like Class D properties that are typically in marginal neighborhoods. Because what happens is you get kind of Class D problems associated with that. And I know because I've made that mistake. And yes, there is a greater reward with that. You get higher returns, but in my opinion, you definitely earn every bit of that. So lesson number one is obviously location. Lesson number two, I would suggest buying the worst house on the block as opposed to the best house on the block. And that has to do with the principle of, is the microphone off now? Okay. Oh, battery is dead. Okay. So I'll just speak up as best I can here. So one of the appraisal principles is the principle of conformity. So if you're in a neighborhood, and I'm sure everybody notices this, or has noticed this, but you've got all the houses in the neighborhood that are very similar, like built in the 70s. They're like split foyers or ranch style homes. And then you've got this geodesic dome that stands out there in the middle of everything. So basically that has to do with the principle of progression or regression. And so if you buy the worst house in the neighborhood, and basically your value of your home tends to rise up to what you're surrounded by, what you conform with. But the same can be said if you bought the biggest house, like let's say you have a 6-bedroom house in a neighborhood that's all like 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom houses, so your value will tend to lower a little bit. And an example of that would be, I don't know if anybody remembers the show Extreme Home Makeover. They did a house up in Havelock a number of years ago. But if I recall, it was like this gigantic house, and it was surrounded in Havelock of these older homes, and they were smaller. And so I'm guessing that they suffered from the principle of regression in that respect if they went to sell it. So, got some batteries? Okay. All right, so you know those big historic homes on Sheridan Boulevard and in the country club area? Well, we were starting out, so obviously we did not buy the big house. We bought like the guest house or the caretaker's cottage in the back, and we bought one that needed some work. As you can tell there, I don't know if you guys can see that on the right, the nice painting. That ended up being my office, but obviously we kind of changed things and put on a fresh coat of paint. Purple cabinets in the kitchen with green plastic tile on the walls. All right, so my wife was kind enough to help me with painting the cabinets, and that was the house. But, oh wait, lesson number 3 here. Always consider the value of your time. And this is something I did not learn until the next slide. But sometimes doing it yourself does not actually save you money. Sometimes it costs you a lot more than just hiring the professionals. And ask me how I know, which is the next slide. So this is the moron there, me with the arrow, learning lesson number 3. So in my wisdom, the house that we bought, it originally actually had green metal siding when we bought it. And it was like faded like a lime green. It was really ugly. But in my infinite wisdom, being the moron that I was like, hey, I'll save some money and just do the siding myself. So I did get my cousin to help out there, and he lasted about 2 days. And then I think he got tired of my wife and I cussing at each other. We were a little frustrated because it was not a fun project. After a couple days, my hands hurt every morning, and it was definitely a learning lesson. And I would suggest that you definitely consider hiring a pro in some cases on some of these bigger projects. So how we got started in real estate again. My friend bought real estate investing. So the last one was our first house that we bought to live in. Then we were like, okay, let's do some real estate investing. So does anybody here, by a show of hands, know Carlton Sheets? Does that name ring a bell? Okay, yeah, so we're dating ourselves there. But does anybody know what an infomercial is? So in the mid-90s, late 90s, there was this guy named Carlton Sheets, and the TV stations would play his infomercials at night when they didn't have any other programming to run. And he had a course, a no down payment, as you can see on the slide. And my friend decided to buy that. And back up, obviously, people are still selling the same courses today, just newer versions. But in any case, my friend bought the course, and it had, I think, like a 90-day money-back guarantee. And so he was going to return it, and I said, hey, well, let me check it out first and read through it. And that kind of got me interested in wanting to learn more. And then I'm old enough that pre-YouTube and Google years, where I actually had to go to the library and check out books and read them, and partially because we didn't have a lot of money back then, and I was too cheap to go to the bookstore and actually pay for a book. So then in 1998, bought our first investment property, so our first official investment, and this was at 19th and Dakota, and that's right by the Lincoln Country Club by Van Dorn, if you're familiar with Lincoln. And then we followed that up by buying several others, and I wish we had kept them all. So life happens and the family's growing. I was dabbling in real estate investing and owning rentals, but I didn't earn enough to go full time. And so I was gaining some momentum, but some interesting things were happening along the way, and the many lessons of real estate investing. Now, I didn't actually officially call all of these lessons in my presentation. They're more like just the journey of the School of Hard Knocks. So the triplex that got away. So this was at 1866 Dakota Street, and hopefully whoever owns that is not in the room right now, but it's a great property. But that's the one that got away. So it was right next to the very first duplex or first property that we had purchased. And I noticed it was kind of like vacant and just not very well kept. So I finally got a hold of the owner. And this is the property here. It's like a stucco type Mediterranean finish. But it's right on the corner of 19th and Dakota. And anyhow, so when I met with the owner and we go in the front door on the left here slide, you go in about 3 steps, and I look up and I could see the sky. I could literally see through the second floor, through the roof, and see the sky. And there was like moisture and that mildew smell everywhere. So obviously this house needed, or this triplex needed some TLC. And I enlisted the help of my brother-in-law. He just had gotten out of the Army, didn't have anything better to do, so he was kind enough to help me. But we gutted that front unit since that had all the water damage. And we redid it, and obviously this is not today's finishes. This is like 20-some years ago, but turned it into a nice, respectable property, and we wish we had that to this day. And that's just a view from another street there, but had that cool balcony above those arches above the front door. So it was a really nice triplex. So Lesson number 4, live within your means. So don't spend more than you make. Play good defense. So has anybody read The Millionaire Next Door? That's one of my favorite books, and that's really how I got started in real estate. But in The Millionaire Next Door, they talk about obviously playing a good offense and earning income, but they talk about definitely playing good defense to be able to keep that income and invest it. So we had to sell our best property to pay debt, and that was partially because we had gone through Dave Ramsey. I'm sure everybody's heard of Dave Ramsey, and he's the get out of debt guy. And so we decided we were going to sell some properties and get our student loans paid off and vehicle loans, that type of thing. But my wife and I loved that triplex, and it's still very painful. And that's why I have to put it in here and drive by every once in a while to check it out. So I remember, play good defense, live within your means, and that way you can keep buying more long-term assets. Oh, okay. This is something to just break it up here a little bit. So, and that way you don't have to hear me just going on and on and on. So hopefully the audio works here. Okay, so sorry. Yeah, I thought that was funny, and it's just a good reminder. My wife and I, as you can see by the rest of my presentation, my wife and I, and I'll take the blame. So it's mainly myself, was not very good at managing our finances. And so had to learn a lot of lessons along the way. So if I can help people not go into debt buying stupid things that you don't need, that would be great. And it would definitely give you a life a lot easier than we had. That being said, and Dave Ramsey says never go into debt, but we have a lot of debt on real estate. So that's another story, okay? But fire damaged houses are not for the faint of heart, okay? So this was a house in Havelock and 7000 Thurston, and I thought, hey, it's a small house, doesn't even have a basement, should be really easy. And we did know it had a fire, but we pretty much had to gut it and almost start from scratch. So I wouldn't recommend starting with that if that's your first property. But I guess I like to do things the hard way and learn. So that's, again, the title of the Moron. So it turned out to be a really nice house, and someone's living there to this day. So I'm very happy to turn it into a nice home. But again, I don't necessarily recommend that to start with. The same thing could be said for moving a house. I don't know if I would actually recommend moving a house, but I had to try it. So my wife and I bought 20 acres down by Norris High School there. And this is down by Firth. And we found this nice house here in Lincoln, 82nd and Pioneers. If you can picture that, if you're from Lincoln, 82nd and Pioneers on the north side. I think there's I don't know what they call it, but it's like a retirement or apartment living for seniors, that kind of thing. But I thought it would be a great idea to take that house and move it. So I did remember one of my lessons in not doing it myself. So I did hire a professional house moving company, and they literally just jack up the house and put it on these beams, and then they literally hook up their truck to it and drive it down the road. So I don't know if you remember, so I don't really like heights, and my brother-in-law, again, he was out of the Army and wasn't working, so that's my brother-in-law on top of that house there, and literally he had to, when they hit a wire that was really low, and not an electrical wire, okay, so let's get that fact. It was just a telephone wire or a cable wire, but he would literally have to pick up the wire and walk it while the house went underneath the wire down the road. So thankfully he was kind enough to do that for me. But we moved the house down to, again, by Firth, and then added on an addition. And it turned out to be a really nice house, and we actually lived there for a number of years. And then again, because of some of my bad decisions with finances, decided to move and sell it. So, okay, the School of Hard Knocks continues. This one, and yeah, this is where I met Josh. So 10400 Stagecoach Road down in Hickman, Nebraska, or just south of Hickman, south of Wagon Train Lake. We bought this house well, let me back up first. So this is how often my wife and I have moved, because we tend to fall in love with the houses that we have redone. But that's not the first time we actually had 10400 in the address that we lived in. So we actually used to live at one point in time about 10 years ago at 10400 South 56th Street. So I don't recommend you go to try to break that record, but we did fix up a lot of houses and move a lot. In any case, we bought this house at the courthouse at a foreclosure auction, and we didn't actually go like look inside the house. We drove by from the road. I don't know if I'd recommend that either to start with, but again, I like to do things the hard way, I guess. But it was a house, a shed on 5 acres, and we bought it for $82,000, so I thought it was a pretty good deal. And it was a fixer-upper. I could see that part, for the most part, from the road. I do have an aerial view, and this will come into the story of as far as the surrounding areas. But in the picture, you can see that red outline, that's the property. And at the bottom it says Stagecoach Road. And then you can see a shed and a long driveway, and then the house is kind of towards the back where it does say 10400. And then above that, there's kind of I don't have enough hands here, but I should have a laser to show you on the screen there. But there's a little curved parcel that's long and narrow where it says section 3687. That is called an old railroad right-of-way. So what happened was there was an old railroad line that went through there, but at some point the railroad stopped working or using it, and so they removed the tracks, and then they just had that as excess land, and it was sold off to somebody else. Sometimes it would go to the neighboring property owners. But this guy, and this is where the story is going, he lost the house in the 5 acres, which is in the area in red, to the foreclosure. So that's where the bank had the loan. But he must have at some point in time bought that railroad right away just north of there. So the house was a hoarder house and then some. So this is part of the property. You can see the shed in the background. And there as well, there was cars, I think like half the cars were already moved by the time we took this picture, but there was junk everywhere, cars everywhere, junk in the shed, junk out of the shed, junk in the house, junk out of the house. This is a photo of some of the guys helping us on the project. And if you can see in that photo, it looks like there's some fresh dirt kind of cut through that little hill there. Well, the good, bad, and the ugly of this house. So the good, eventually we lived there, and then we did eventually sell it, and we made some money, so that was good. And hey, I met Josh Nix at that house. So that's the one he was talking about where he had done some work for me. And by the way, it wasn't that you did a bad job or something like that. I think I was just too cheap and still hadn't, I guess, learned my entire lesson on doing it myself. The bad part about this project, and there was some ugly part too, and sad, but the bad part is I learned what an easement by necessity was, or is. I learned about a guy that got foreclosed on that was trying to build his own driveway through the property that we just bought. And he decided he wanted to try to live in an army tent behind the property that we bought in the railroad right away. So here's that picture again. And you can see like some junk there towards the top in the middle of that right away. So that's probably, and this is a current aerial, so that's probably the remnants of his army tent and the stuff that I think he literally was starting to take junk and move back there, but he had no access to it. And that's where I learned that you can't landlock a parcel in the state of Nebraska. And I found out that technically he could have claimed an easement by necessity, but thankfully I got to bluff him and he didn't go after that, and he never did live there again, or at least try to live in his army tent. But the sad part about this and the ugly part is he had a dog, which was not the bad part. It's just the dog didn't know that the house had been foreclosed on. So I'm there with those guys. Go back here. Yeah, those guys. So we're cleaning up the house. They were outside there at that point. But one day it was like 90 degrees and super hot, and we're in that house. It had no air conditioning. I don't even think it had electricity at the time, but we're cleaning out all the junk. And our water was outside in the driveway in the vehicle, and the dog thought we were, I guess, trying to hurt the owner, or he was basically trying to protect the property. Well, I didn't want to hurt the dog, and so I called animal control. Well, I found out that animal control does not go out to Lancaster County. So a sheriff's deputy had to come out, and he didn't know where the dog was either, so we had to go upstairs and try to talk to him on the phone and tell him where the dog was, that kind of thing. Well, let's see here. Okay, so it's a long driveway. The sheriff's deputy basically parked at Stagecoach and was walking down the road there. But because of all the cars and the junk that the guy had left behind, the sheriff's deputy didn't know where the dog was. And unfortunately, the dog charged the deputy and he had to put the dog down. So that was sad. But those are some of the real life things you're going to run into in real estate. So yeah. But it did turn out to be a nice house. Just a sad story there. So the Moron and one giant big problem here. So I was stuck at my job. I really enjoyed being an appraiser at the state of Nebraska, the Department of Roads at the time, now the Department of Transportation. But that was probably just for the first year because I thought I was only going to be there like 1 to 2 years. But again, this was during the housing market downturn. And so all of a sudden it became 2 to 3 years, and then all of a sudden the years start going by. And great things with the family and the wife. We're raising the family. We're buying maybe 1 to 2 houses each year, mostly rentals and some flips. Along the way, wonderful experience. My wife and I and our family, we got to go with some other members of our church to Costa Rica on a mission trip. But going on a mission trip with a family of 7 is obviously not cheap, so we had to do some fundraising. And me and my infinite wisdom thought a great fundraising idea for the family would be, rather than hiring a crew to come help clean out a house, I was like, hey, we could clean out the house and then take that money and put it towards our fundraising. So we probably went through about 3 or 4 roll-off containers at this house. And it was a true hoarder house, and there was junk everywhere. We even like put junk out at treasures at the curb, and people would come by and take them. But it took a long time. And I got the kids obviously to help. Even the kids' friends were helping. And we even had some other helpers as well. But Rowen, my youngest, and again, we had adopted him at 5 years old. And so he was about 5 or 6 years old. And all of us are cleaning, but a 5 or 6 year old's really not going to do a whole lot for helping on a clean out, obviously. But we couldn't find him. And my wife's like, hey, where's Rowen? And we're like, seriously, no, where is Rowen? Well, Rowen had found a pink gun. And yeah, thankfully though, it was not a real gun, okay? So that's the good part. The bad part was, in Rowen's mind, he was playing with a pink gun on the left, and it probably looked like that. But in reality, it was not a pink gun, but a pink adult toy. And he was running around the house shooting people with a pink gun. So I can thank Aaron Impens for that story, because we bought the house from Aaron as a wholesale deal. We did end up fixing it up, obviously, and selling it, but it was not funny at the time, and I'm just thankful that other families from our church were not there helping do the clean out. So yeah, that was a little embarrassing. Oops. Okay, so the problem continues for the Moron here. I felt like I was in the 1980s. I was a cubicle cowboy working for the Nebraska Department of Transportation. The place, which I'll show you here, was outdated to say the least. And the only saving grace that gave me peace was I was like, okay, at least my tax dollars are not going for this fancy office. But it still felt like jail. And I was like, how do I get out of here and actually do what I love, which is real estate investing? So in my mind, this is what the cubicles looked like, but they weren't really quite that bad. It was more just like 1980s cubicles. So the problem kept getting worse. I really felt like my job was almost like sucking the joy from my life. I felt like I was stuck in cubicle jail. And I say that because, well, I was one of the lucky ones. My cubicle actually had a small little window that I could look outside, but my view was of the state penitentiary across the road. And so I literally felt like I was in jail. But day after day, I went to that job and worked full-time Monday through Friday. But after work, I would continue to work on remodeling houses or collecting rents or analyzing properties. Sometimes I remember working on a property till 1 or 2 in the morning, and then going back home, getting just a few hours of sleep, and going back to work at 6:30 the next day. So this house right here, it's down by Firth, we flipped it, but this was the house that my wife was like, okay, this is not fun anymore, and you need to give up and stop buying houses. So thankful that I didn't listen to her. But in any case, this house, we were like days away from putting it on the market. And it was Christmas break, and I took the kids over there to the house, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go check out the new carpet, check out the final punch list, and make sure everything's ready to go, because we're literally gonna put it on the market. And so we go into the house, and I'm like, oh, checking the carpet, walking around the first floor, and my kids are like, hey, Dad, there's some water in the basement. And I was like, oh, okay. So I go to the basement, and this is probably not as bad as that house was, because this is just, I didn't have a picture of the flood. But the basement in the actual house, it was thigh-high water and really cold because it was the winter. But that was not fun. When you're days away from putting a house on the market and then you kind of have to start over from scratch on the basement, not a lot of fun. And trying to think of, basically the long story on that is the basement. Does anybody know what an ejector pit is in a basement? Ejector pit? Okay. So that's when your waste from your main floor goes out, like, let's say this is your basement wall and this is your ceiling. The waste goes out here and not down in a floor drain and out. So you have to have an ejector pit that takes the water from your basement floor drain and pumps it up to go outside, okay? So what happened was the water conditioner, because the water was so bad there, the water conditioner, the plumber, I guess, didn't tie down the discharge for the drain line on the water conditioner, and it started flapping water all over the place, which tripped the circuit for the GFI outlet for the basement sump pit. So, and the water conditioner was left on the on position because it didn't shut off because it was plugged into that same circuit. So the water kept going and the sump pit had shut off. So that was a fun learning experience on that, but thankfully I did not listen to my wife. And I only thought about quitting real estate one time, and just for a few minutes though. So this was a unique one. So does anybody remember Craigslist? Well, back in the day, before, this was before Facebook Marketplace and Zillow really took off. But you could actually find real legitimate deals, and you would advertise to buy and sell properties on Craigslist and apartments or houses. And one night, about 8 o'clock at night, I'm looking up real estate, and I see this ad that literally says investor special, and house needs work, blah, 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 has water damage. So I get a hold of the seller right away. And I'm talking to him, and I think he wanted like $50,000 maybe, but he was just done with it because he was frustrated with the tenants. And he was a true don't wanter, as they say. And I got him down to $45,000, and we signed the paperwork. And I was like, great, I think I can make some money on this one. So this was in the North Bottoms, just north of Memorial Stadium. And I didn't really want to keep that property as a rental. I'm wishing I would have now. But basically, I was like, okay, I know my friend Dave Bader does this thing called wholesaling. So, and Dave's in the room here. He probably remembers this. But I was like, Dave, hey, can you wholesale this for me? And then we'll split the deal. And he was like, sure. So less than a day, one second here, I got to take a drink here. So less than a day after Dave started to try to wholesale a deal, I'm going to call this guy batshit crazy Larry from Craigslist, because he was pretty much crazy. So Dave was kind enough to try to wholesale the property, and I think he talked to the neighbor on the left and the neighbor on the right, and apparently one of them knew this crazy Larry guy, because a day later, crazy Larry is like freaking out, calling me, texting me, emailing me, threatening my family. I don't know his background, all this fun stuff. He went on Craigslist and proceeds to type in and put ads on there that Ryan Omel is a scammer, all this fun stuff. And I did nothing wrong other than just take him up on his ad. He was just mad that we were going to make some extra money on it. But he was crazy enough to register the domain name ryanomel.com and start putting that I'm a scammer all over the internet. So eventually I convinced Dave to just let that one go and let's move on to the next one, because that guy was truly, truly crazy. But then, I don't know, a couple days later, maybe a week later, I get this voicemail from somebody at the Real Estate Commission, okay? Yes, the Real Estate Commission. Does anybody remember this theme song from Cops? Okay. All right. So the funny thing about this one is the Real Estate Commission didn't even care about wholesaling back then. Those were the days. It was fun. He called me and wanted to see if I was a licensed agent, and I said, why, no, I'm not. And he said, oh, okay, you're good. You didn't do anything wrong. If only it were that way now, right? So times have changed. Oh. So I met my trusted guide, trying to get myself out of that job. And let me just back up, I guess, here real quick and say, like, if you enjoyed your job, I would stay at your job as long as you can. I just didn't necessarily enjoy it. I was more of wanted to be outdoors. I didn't want to be inside all the time. So just keep that in mind throughout my story. Just because I'm complaining about a job doesn't mean you should quit your job, okay? I want to clarify that. But anyhow, so I met my trusted guide, which was Bigger Pockets, podcasts. YouTube was growing more popular at the time and having more content. So anytime I had free time or at work or driving around town, I would continue to listen to podcasts, audiobooks, all that fun stuff from all these people on the list. And hopefully you know some of those folks. So, Moron no more, right? The millions. So after listening to all those different books and podcasts and taking notes, and after countless deals, I should be on smooth sailing to make millions, right? I really should be. But I needed a plan first. So the plan was, or is, this is the plan for right now, actually. So there's more than 20 people in the room. So if everybody can write down this email address or type it into your phone, okay, if you can do that. And then I just need 20 people in this room to sign up for my limited time only special coaching program. Act now, and it's only $100,000. If I can get 20 people to do that, I will have my millions. Obviously, that's a joke, but because I said I wasn't selling anything, and that's not a realistic plan. So the plan was I was going to find a business partner because I just thought that would be a great thing. And so I actually talked to Josh Nix probably a couple years before this and asked him to be a business partner. He probably doesn't remember that. He probably was mad because I didn't call him back for more work on my Stagecoach house. But no, so anyhow, I'd run across Michael, my business partner, and he was a younger guy, younger than me, obviously. And he was a hustler, and I'm like, okay, let's do this thing. And that way we can both work together and both quit our jobs, because he was working a full-time job as well. So the rocket launch right up to the moon and back. So it was 2019, and we started traveling and doing some education as well, as far as educating ourselves. But we went to a scale event in Salt Lake City with Cody Hoffine. Him and his business partner, just like a year or two after that, they had founded the Joe Homebuyers franchise, if you ever heard of that. So they had a really good operation that we got to learn from. We joined Investor Fuel, which is a mastermind. And so that's where you'll go to different parts of the country, and then you get to network with other people that are doing the same thing that we were wanting to do, which was invest full-time, buying houses, fixing them up, selling them, wholesaling, all that fun stuff. So we had a great time. We got to meet lots of people. I got to meet Rich Dad, Poor Dad himself. Bought lots of houses during the time. We were rocket home buyers at the time. And yes, I put that in there for my wife. She's not here, but looking for my stud muffin is what that says. So saw that in the basement of a house. My son helping me with my to-do list at the office there one day. It says, write in my diary, send Michael, who was my business partner, send him a love poem, give him lots of hugs and kisses, and drink beer. So my son was very helpful in my to-do list. The photo on the right is a 12-plex that we bought near the university, and somebody was kind enough to destroy the place on the way out and leave some nice graffiti for us. The cat house on the left, this was literally the cat house from you know what. You could smell the house from the road or from the street, and I think we found like, I don't know, 8 to 10 unfortunately dead cats in the house, because this house was a true hoarder house and a cat house. And that's not actually a cat there. That's just, when we picked up the dead cat, that's the dust surrounding that. So yeah, you can only imagine. So we were making some good money, not necessarily millions, obviously, but making good money. And who couldn't go wrong in real estate right before COVID and a couple years after that? You literally couldn't buy something and not make money. It was just crazy times with the low interest rates and all the money that they were putting into the economy. So we were launching rocket to the moon, right? And got to travel even more. That's Tom Kroll, got to meet him. Got to meet one of the guys that down in Scottsdale. I got to meet one of the guys that helped Robert Kiyosaki actually create the cash flow game. His voice was actually on the audio tapes. That's how old my edition is. It actually has audio tapes, but that was his voice on there. So lesson number 5 is have reserves. So you need to make sure you have reserves or a rainy day fund, and not just for unexpected repair items on your property, but I'm talking like unexpected changes in the market. And again, since I was smart and wanted to do real estate investing full time and not have a nice steady paycheck at a full-time job, you need to just make sure you have reserves for when things slow down, because markets do go up and they do go down. And recently with over the last year and a half or so, with the rates going up, things haven't been the best, so to speak. So it's a good thing that we did have reserves. And obviously real estate's not liquid, so if you don't have reserves and you need to sell something real quick, it takes a while to get some money back out of those investments. So things were going really great, and Rocket Homebuyers was going to take on the world, I guess. So we decided we're going to move outside of just Nebraska, and we're going to trademark the name Rocket Homebuyers. And Rocket Mortgage is a little bit bigger company, and they have a company called Rocket Homes, which is a real estate brokerage, and they operate that in a number of states. Well, within a week of us contacting our attorney and trying to register the trade name Rocket Homebuyers, we get a cease and desist letter from their attorneys. So that brings up lesson number 6. So know when to hold them and know when to fold them, okay? So sometimes you need to just regroup, retreat, rethink, reorganize, or even rebrand. Obviously, other times you do want to hang on and go for the long haul. But we figured us, smaller company based out of Lincoln, Nebraska, taking on $1 billion company just to try to register a name of Rocket Homebuyers was probably not the fight we wanted to pick. So we rebranded to Launch Homebuyers. So finally had success. I was able to leave my full-time job, and we're doing real estate investing. So coming back to the question that I had at the beginning, is it okay to be a moron? And I say yes, but only for a little while. So in order to be good at something, you must first be bad at that thing. If you never take the first step and suck at something, you're never going to get to your millions. And I'm not actually just talking about millions of dollars. I'm talking about like $1 million experiences, $1 million relationships, $1 million friendships, $1 million views, whatever the case may be. Maybe it's $1 million assets. So here is my relatively succinct formula for all of you. Don't do what I did. Let's just put that right up there. But you do need to be a moron for a little brief time here to become or to go to the millions mark and to have success. So first thing is mindset. Don't be afraid to be a moron. Like literally, don't be afraid. Seek a trusted guide or seek guidance. Come up with a plan and focus on one thing. If you noticed on my story, I did not really focus on one thing, like fire damaged house, moving a house, just lots of random rabbit trails that I don't know if I would necessarily recommend. So I would say focus on one thing and then execute that plan that you've come up with. And what I mean by that is you need to take consistent action. And not just action like, hey, it's January 1st and I've come up with this New Year's resolution and I take action for the first couple weeks and then I just, fall off the wagon. No, I'm talking like day by day, month by month, year by year, consistently. Stick with it. Get back up and stay the course when you have a failure. Eventually you will have success and fail forward. So it might take you like 5 to 10 years because most of you are probably a lot brighter than I am, but it took me probably a lot more than 20. So don't do what I did in that respect. Okay, so I promised you that I was going to give away some books, and I'm going to open it up for questions. But the first book that I do want to give away before we go into questions is, and what you're probably wondering, why does he have a kid's book on here? So it's actually one of my favorite books that I used to read to my kids when they were younger. And it's Guess How Much I Love You. And so it is a kid's book, and the very last line of the book ends with right up to the moon and back. And so I won't spoil the entire book, but that's where I came up with the title to my presentation, or at least part of it. But I would like to know in the room here, who has the youngest child, like the parents? So does anybody have a child that's under 1 year of age, 1 year old or younger? Okay, so we've got 2. Okay, so does anybody have, wait a minute, is there only 2 people in here that have, okay, well then I'm gonna make that easy. I'm gonna give both of you a book, because I brought 2, just in case there was a tie. So, yeah, while I'm getting these books out, if no one has any questions, that's fine. But if you do have questions, I'm giving away some books just to kind of entice you to go ahead and come up with some questions. So, does anybody have a question?
Yeah, I got a question.
Okay.
What did your wife do?
Can you pass that down too, by the way? So that is a good question. So my wife is a registered nurse, but she hasn't worked. Basically, COVID kind of pissed her off, really, quite frankly, with all the masks and all that crap. So then she was like, okay, I'm not going back. So she handles, so let me back up to answer that question. So my wife and I, as you can tell by the story, we've been buying and selling houses and had rentals for a number of years. So before I joined with my business partner. So we have a couple LLCs and corporations. And so my wife handles that along with our assistant, and she manages the rentals and the flips that we do personally. So good question. And she takes care of our kids like a lot, so I'm thankful for that. I don't know who was next, so somebody's gonna have to help me out here. Jim, you got a question?
Who was your house mover, the contractor?
So who was my house mover? The first one, believe it or not, I didn't learn my lesson, so I did more than one. But the first one was O'Neill House. I want to say O'Neill, but I think they were out of like North Dakota or something like that. That was a long time ago. But most recently, it's been Ryan Baltzberger with Ensor House Movers. They're down by Tecumseh. So.
We use Dave Scribs out of...
Scribs, out of David City, yep.
Quick story on that. My mom, we moved my parents' house, and my mom was totally apprehensive about doing it. And Dave came in and said, you can put a glass of water on your kitchen table, and there won't be a drop spilled by the time we set it down. And he was absolutely right.
Yeah, it's wild to see that happen when they do move houses, but if you ever are crazy enough to want to do that and you want to ask questions about that, feel free to reach out to me. But don't do a 2-story house, I will tell you that much, because the utility costs will be outrageous. James.
What was your
Oh, wait.
moment you decided to quit?
Okay, so I have ADHD, if you guys haven't been able to figure that out. So let me come back to that. I forgot to give away the book, so we've got a couple questions here. So, okay, you can come up and take your pick of the books. You were first, Jim, and then James. So your question was, what was my aha moment as far as when I decided to leave my job? Okay, I don't know how to answer that other than like the very first day. So, I mean, I laugh about that, but basically, if you were active in real estate at that time, like literally the subprime market like stopped and lending just shut off. So housing like literally stopped. They actually had to do 2 homebuyer tax credits, the federal government, to try to spur people to buy houses. So nothing was happening with real estate. So right before that, in my infinite wisdom, I became a real estate appraiser and a real estate agent. And I only was able to like eat the food that I killed, so to speak. Like if I didn't bring in the business, I didn't have any money. So that's when I decided I'm gonna have to go feed my family and take a job at the state. So I thought I was only going to be there 1 to 2 years and become a certified general real estate appraiser, but I was there a long time. So
How long were you there?
I don't like to say that. I said the years went by, and I was there 10 years. And I was so frustrated they gave me a 10-year plaque. And if you work for the state, I'm not knocking it. It's actually a great job for somebody that wants stability in their life. But me, as you can tell, I like to do things kind of crazy and take some risks. So it just wasn't for me. So, oh, and if you did ask a question, I've got 4 more books up here if you want to come grab one. Okay, I don't know who's next. This young lady? Oh, okay. Uh-oh.
Mine's easy. What's the number one thing you would tell your 22-year-old self?
What's
If you were in today's day and market.
What's the number one thing I would tell my younger self, basically, if I'm starting over in today's market? Well, probably the first thing I would tell myself, or what I would do, is like I would definitely get crystal clear on what my goal was. So you all heard like begin with the end in mind. Otherwise, you're going to do just like haphazard things, which is, you can kind of see what I did, and it took me a heck of a long time to recover from some of those things. So yeah, live within your means, and then figure out where you want to go. Because I was talking to somebody else earlier, I can't remember who it was, but there's so many different facets of real estate. You don't have to do like fix and flip single family homes. You don't have to like be a landlord and own single family houses. You can do multifamily, you can do commercial, industrial, mini storage, hotels. You can do timber, not necessarily in Nebraska maybe, but you can do all sorts of things with real estate. So you need to figure out what you want to do. And you might have to try a few different things and maybe go work for somebody else. Even if you have to work for free for somebody that's experienced in what you're doing, it'll pay like countless dividends down the road, because it'll save you a lot of headaches potentially. So there's a couple things.
So in choosing a partner and figuring out somebody that has your same mission, vision, and values, like, how do you choose one of those moving forward and knowing that you're on the same page?
Yeah, that is a darn good question. So, okay, so here's the lowdown on my business partner. I love him, but like 3 months after we started, he decides to move from Lincoln, Nebraska to Las Vegas. So that was not something I had planned on, and that kind of changed things with our trajectory. So I thought and we do have like the same core values, but I did not anticipate that when I formed a partnership. So I guess you'd probably want to be a little bit more crystal clear on, but if you have the core values, that's probably the key thing in finding a partner. I was just at an event down in Orlando, and Tom Kroll, he's a very wise coach, real estate coach, and he said, don't bring on a partner ever. And he said, just hire somebody and pay them like a profit share or something like that. So that's my 2 tidbits. So I don't know if I answered your question or not, but what was your specific question? Because again, I really struggle with ADHD, so.
I know you have a partner, and I was just curious how that relationship grew to get you guys to where you're at today.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm hesitant to answer that question because, quite frankly, it's changed. So that's the challenge of having a partnership, right? You got 2 different people. So Michael and I are both visionary, and we both want to lead. So that kind of changes the dynamics a little bit. And it's been harder than I think either one of us anticipated. So, but it's been a great ride. It's just now he runs the home buying company, Launch Homebuyers, and I run the long-term holds. So that way we both get to be the leader. So what other questions do you have? And if you don't, that's fine. I'm just happy to answer any questions. I don't know who was next. Help me out here. Okay, we'll go over here and we'll come around. Zach.
For somebody who's looking for their first deal, or maybe they've done a deal or 2, but it hasn't gone off like they want to, you obviously have a lot of experience in a wide range of real estate investing. Do you have any advice for how do you figure out what is a good path for you to go on? Like as far as what type of investment to go after? And what strategy?
For like what type of real estate investment to go after?
Yeah, but like what advice do you have to understand for yourself, like, hey, the skill sets that I have align towards doing this type of real estate investment?
I think you just have to get in there and do some deals and maybe even like lose some money, but you don't really want to do that. So one way is to do a joint venture with somebody or work with somebody that's experienced in there. Like, let's say you wanted to get into real estate development, or land development. You could go talk to somebody and see if you can find out what their need is and then go help them, fulfill, find that need. Like, oh, I'm trying to find land, or I'm trying to find this. It could be mini storage units, and then you go try to find a mini storage unit. And then hopefully they'll teach you how to do it, because then you don't have as much at risk and you don't lose money. Otherwise, probably start smaller than larger. Like, maybe don't take down like a $10 million apartment complex. Maybe start with like a $125,000, $200,000 single family house. So, yeah, I've done a little bit of everything, but I haven't done a whole lot in commercial or multifamily. So I'm probably not the best, because I'm really biased towards single family, because I actually enjoy taking those crappy, smelly houses and fixing them up and making them look good again. So, okay, so we were going around the room here.
How did you pay for your properties? Did you use your own capital? Did you use any type of lending? Just curious.
So how did we pay for our properties? So, like back in the day or more recently?
More recent would probably be
Okay.
better for me.
Okay, so if you're starting out, I'm sure, I think there's some bankers in the room, but typically they want you to have some skin in the game, so they want you to have a down payment. And so you'd either have to come up with that and do traditional bank financing, come up with a down payment, or you could always do a joint venture or ask some friends if they'll be willing to help with the down payment, and you kind of give them a share of the profit.
Josh, next is right there.
Yeah, I was going to say, or hard money is another option, which is a good short-term solution. You like, let's say you find a deal, and if you don't act on it quickly, it's going to get taken. So you use Josh, Good Life Lending, as one of the drink sponsor, the drink sponsor tonight. So talk to Josh. But we've used Josh even more recently to get some deals. It's like we've got it under contract and we have to act quickly, because that's a lot of times sellers are usually that we deal with are in a tough situation, so we have to act quickly, and we don't have unlimited funds, so we'll use hard money. So, and then eventually, obviously, we'll refinance it out. Sorry, Josh, we don't keep it with you forever. Yes.
During the last 2 years, what are the primary sources of deals? How are you finding them? And then just give us an idea of what metrics you're using in your mind when you're evaluating a deal to go the next step.
Okay. So primary methods are the same methods that everybody else uses. I mean, we do marketing, and so we spend money on direct mail, our website, Google Ads, Facebook. We do TV commercials. We've tried a little bit of everything. We've even tried billboards. We get referrals from other people. A little bit of everything, but the paid marketing is probably the best, I guess, as opposed to like driving for dollars or cold calling, things like that. Those haven't been as successful. And then the second part of your question was how do we analyze or how do we evaluate deals? So that's a good question, because it kind of depends on what the exit strategy is. So we'll wholesale properties. And so I'd really, quite honestly, I'm not involved with the home buying company anymore for probably the last year. So I don't know what their criteria is specifically right now, but it used to be like what everybody else does for the most part in evaluating a deal. It was like take 75 or 70% of ARV minus repairs, and then knock off a little bit for a wholesale profit. But if you're going to keep it as a long-term hold, it's going to have a different criteria. So I don't know if that really helps you. Were you talking long-term or were you talking short-term?
Long-term.
But it's going to be different for everyone, because like I live in Southwest Lincoln, so I guess That would be, here's my only sales pitch, I guess. So if anybody has any deals in Southwest Lincoln that you don't want, give me a call. But I will actually pay more for deals in Southwest Lincoln because it's a lot easier for me to deal with my operations, so I don't have to drive clear across to Northeast Lincoln. So then that would change the criteria because I might be willing to pay a little bit more. So I think there was, I don't remember who was next here, so. Okay, Jonathan.
So my question is, how much do you set aside for your reserves? And do you base that on like property value, or do you base it off monthly cash flows? Is there a specific percentage that you use?
Well, I would say you'd probably want to like pay a guru or somebody that's really successful to answer that question. I don't have a set amount like per property or something like that. But if you were starting out and you had like, I guess if you're starting out and you're going from like 1, 2, 3, 4 properties and they're like single family, again, because that's where I'm experienced. I don't know about industrial or other properties. But if it was single family, I would probably set aside $5,000 in reserves per property, depending on the price point. I mean, if you're dealing with $250,000, $300,000 homes on up, it might be different. But for the median house price, I would say $5,000 per house, just to at least get you by, to at least have something. And then at a certain point, when at a certain point you have maybe 50, 60, 100,000 in reserves because you have a number of properties, and then the cash flow just kind of keeps filling it up, and you don't have to worry about it as much because you're spreading it out amongst all the properties. So, and again, if you're in multifamily or some other property class, I can't really speak to that. So I think we had 2 ladies over here.
So when you were doing the fix and flip, did you put a lot of sweat equity? I saw some pictures you guys were cleaning, but I mean, did you do the cleaning mostly, or did you hire somebody and then you hired contractors, or did you outsource?
So,
Services,
yeah, well, that's a good question. So on your first deal, like if you're wanting, like you're dead set on doing like fix and flips or even owning a single family house and you want to learn the process, I would suggest doing some of it yourself to a certain extent because that's how you're going to probably learn more. But I actually again, I'm dating myself here, but I actually had like these things, I think they were like called Time Life books or something like that, but they were literally these books that had pictures on how to repair things. Because I remember learning how to solder copper pipes by a book. I mean, again, this is pre-YouTube and Google days. So we did a lot ourselves at first. And then in Lincoln, they have a law that says you have to be a licensed plumber, electrician, HVAC contractor if you're going to do work on a property that you're not going to live in. And so you have to hire the right people on that. And I would definitely recommend that. So it's a combination, but if you have more money and you don't want to learn the ins and outs, because it does help to learn like what's behind the wall. How does a house compose? Like, how does a house work? So that's why I say maybe do it yourself on part of it on the first 1 or 2 properties. So Megan, did you have a question?
Yeah. How has your business pivoted or changed with the higher interest rates? And are you guys doing anything different going into the future? Are you looking at market trends or?
Yeah. So. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, things have slowed down for us to a certain extent. Last year was a really tough year for our business. And so this year, I mean, we just cut costs and had to make things really lean and mean. And I think, quite honestly, for anybody that's flipping a house right now, I think you got to be really careful because I think from now until March, it's going to be some potentially tough times for you trying to sell a flip. That's what we've experienced already. A number of our flips are just sitting on the market. And even ones that are wholesales where we're just cleaning them out and putting them back on the market, those are sitting. And I'm talking to investors in other parts of the country and they're saying the same thing. And I think that's because the interest rates are still high and everybody knows that they're going to come down. They're just kind of waiting before they make a decision on buying. Also, you've got the election, and for whatever reason, people are scared about the election and think the sky is falling. And then you've also got the seasonal nature of real estate that slows down late fall and winter. So I would just say be prepared, and that's what we're doing. We're preparing for kind of a long winter. And then I think in March, I think the rates will come down a little bit. People will get over the fact that the sky is not falling with the election, and the rates, the people will normally be in the cycle of it's spring, it's time to move and go look for a house. So that's all we've done is cost cutting and then be prepared for that. And then beyond that, I don't know. So if you know the answer, then let me know. So would love to be able to predict the future.
You said you guys were listening to Dave Ramsey way back in the day, and so you paid off some, I think it was student loan debt, you said, and maybe something else. Usually that's pretty low interest rate debt. I don't know about yours. So how do you guys feel in retrospect of paying off that debt with by selling a cash flowing property?
Well, if you listen to Dave Ramsey, and this is my interpretation, but I think he's more on the psychology of accomplishing paying down some small debts rather than paying off the highest rate first. So it's more just the psychology behind it. I probably wouldn't do things differently other than, again, go back to one of the lessons where I said live within your means. So my wife was trying to stay home as much as possible and work part-time. We had 5 kids, and that in and of itself is an expense. And then working at the state, I didn't make a lot of money. So that's why we moved a lot, because we took advantage of the, live in a house for 2 years and then sell it, and you don't have to pay tax on the gain because it's your principal residence or primary residence. And to answer your question on the interest rate, I understand what you're saying, and yeah, probably knowing everything that I know now, then yeah, I could do things differently, and I probably should have. But for me, the psychology of not having personal debt and getting those wins was just something that you can't really put a price on, I guess. All right, well,
Sorry.
Yes.
As an actual appraiser, what's your take on why 95% of appraisals always magically come in at exactly the purchase price?
That is a darn good question. I'm just kind of laughing because I was almost going to talk about something like that, but I've actually gotten so far away from appraisals that I don't really want to talk about it. But if you put it in terms of what typically in an appraisal, if it's not a brand new home, they're typically relying on the market comparison, the sales comparison approach, right? So they're comparing your house to other houses that have sold in the market, okay? So they're usually going to have several different comps that are similar to your house, obviously, right? And they're going to make adjustments based on the differences, right? Well, is the subject property, which is the house you're selling, is that a pretty good comp? If it's been exposed to the market, that's a pretty damn good comp because it's the subject property. There's no adjustments that you need to make. When I was doing it, I never did like to do that just because it drove me crazy too. But really your subject property, if it's exposed to the market, that's typically your best comp. And so that's probably, I'm assuming that's why a lot of times the price will end up really close to the agreed upon purchase price or the contract price. So,
which I would totally agree with that. That inherently defeats the purpose of an appraisal in the first place. We're all just spending a bunch of money on appraisals that essentially are going to use the price itself to justify to a lender that.
Yeah. Well,
I appreciate your thoughts.
Yeah. I think it was back in 1997, I took my first appraisal class. And I think even back then, they were talking about how AVMs were going to put appraisers out of business and you shouldn't get into appraisal. So AVM is like an automated valuation model, kind of like AI essentially, or machine learning, or algorithms. I think that'll eventually happen, but you're still going to have somebody that's qualified that can represent on essentially the bank or lender's behalf that goes in and checks it out. And then you could eliminate potentially some of those costs. But I agree. It is what it is. But I think a lot of professions have things like that it's just the way it is. So you got to play by the system if you want the bank's money or the lender's money, right? So, all right. I appreciate everyone for bearing with me because obviously I'm not the best public speaker, but hopefully you learned some things of what not to do so that you can become successful. So thanks a lot.